Hey, what up? It's Tampa Brad back at you with law number 36 of the 48 Laws of Power. Damn, close. This is 3/4 of the way there. So law number 36 is disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge. And I love this law. This is one that I personally have understood very viscerally for a very, 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 very long time. It's just made sense to me that when something is bothering you or something is just like just grinds your gears, like you can't stand it, if you can just act like it doesn't bother you at all and that it's just whatever, you're just like, oh, okay, that's cool, and just keep going. If there's a person behind whatever is bothering you and potentially even trying to bother you, and you just don't pay any attention to it, it will drive the person crazy. Literally, it'll drive them insane. And what's so funny about that is when someone's trying to get a reaction and you don't give the reaction, it just casts light on, if someone's doing something petty, it just casts light on the pettiness of it. So, you know, these laws, you know, and these videos, I try not to make them win-lose. I try to make them win-win, but look, sometimes you need a petty win. If someone's being petty with you, sometimes you need to have a way to be the bigger person and also get a petty win out of it. Because at the end of the day, we're biological. You know, we're not like spiritual, infinite beings. I mean, we are, but at the same time, we're in a body. You know, we're like, sometimes you just need a petty win. And so what this law is about how to get those petty wins that are just gonna just be like, oh, got him. But in a way, it's gonna make you the bigger person and it's gonna make you just look like the biggest badass ever. So the author starts off this chapter by talking about actually someone who transgresses the law, someone who does not obey this law. And the offending party is actually the United States government. Funny enough, who'd have thunk it? Couldn't ignore a problem, the US government, huh? So what happened in, I believe it was the early 1930s, is Pancho Villa, who is a Mexican general, kind of a bandit, like bandit type. Apollo's back there because he's Mexican. He's like, yeah, Mexico, viva la Chihuahua. He's from actually the Chihuahua, whatever that place is called in Mexico. Anyway, it's not about you, Apollo. It's about law of power. And so what happens is Pancho Villa, he kind of loses popularity. He has to go back to his banditing ways, and he winds up doing a raid into the United States in New Mexico and kills a couple people, gets a lot of press in the US press. And it's like the US superpower attacked by bandit Pancho Villa. And so what happens is the US launches, and not an all-out, but a counter-strike led by a big general, and they send something crazy like 20,000 troops down into Mexico to basically chase Pancho Villa. And so what happens is, it's a long, drawn-out ordeal. It goes on for like 18 months, and more people get sent down there. And then they have to send down the jets because a unit gets lost. And then they have to send in an army reserve because they need more people. And the villages are starting to fight back. And now the villages are on the side of Pancho Villa. And what happens is the US goes and chases and chases and chases after this tiny little bandit. And they do a couple things in doing that. A, they spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars doing it, which if you think 1930 now, it sounds like, oh, hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever, no big deal. Back in 1930, crazy amount of money. That's like saying billions of dollars today. Chasing around one little bandit with like a couple hundred soldiers. Two, they completely embarrass themselves on the world stage. They send it, in the end, it was something like 125,000 soldiers were sent after this dude, never found him. And then three, they actually made him more popular, not only in Mexico, but also in the United States, because it was just like, this is so funny. This little guy with his couple hundred soldiers has evaded 100,000 person army from the United States, the superpower of the world at the time. And so by not being able to understand that Pancho Villa was just a little gnat, just a little fly that the US could have just been like, whatever, get out of here, man. By not obeying this law, the United States wasted a ton of money, lost a lot of face, and did the exact opposite of what they were trying to do. They made the guy more popular. It was a complete backfire, a complete sham. And it's because they didn't understand that in something that's small and petty and that isn't a real threat to you, if it's not a real threat to your well-being or your financial well-being, you actually have no choice but to ignore it. Because if you pay attention with it, and Robert Greene gives an awesome description of this in the book, what he says is you become in lockstep with that other person. you completely lose your initiative because you become entwined with them. When you get to reacting to someone, you literally, some people, if you're esoteric, you could think of it as you become energetically in tune with them. And so you guys start, you would say, again, esoteric, but you would say you start vibrating at the same frequency and you literally become locked in and your destiny becomes like that. So what that means is, if the person or thing that's causing you all this trouble, that really is just a little nuisance, you're blowing it up too much in your brain anyways, if that thing is not something that you want to be in lockstep with and be associated with, potentially forever, depending on how far you take this, you have no choice but to ignore it. Now, the author goes on from someone who transgressed the law to someone who nailed it, and I mean on a level of epic proportion. So as soon as I start talking about it, you'll know exactly who it is. So King Henry VIII in England, right? That's the dude who was married to, I forget her name, but this queen, and she didn't give him any sons. And so she gets older, and now he, has these concubines and whatever, and has a new mistress. And so he wants to marry the new girl so that he can have a son with her and have it be a legitimate son so he can keep on his bloodline, blah, 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 royalty stuff. And so the guy knows that because his wife, the queen, is good friends with the Pope, I think it was Pope Clement at the time, he knows that if he tries to annul the marriage, it's just not gonna work. And so what he does is, like a true baller and a true badass who really is gonna live this law, he declares that he no longer follows Catholicism, and he is now establishing his own church, the Anglican Church. So in case you forgot from history class, that's King Henry, who does it, I believe it was for Anne Boleyn, I believe was the girl he was going for, who he wanted to marry. So he does it. He ignores the Pope and the Vatican and says, hey, I'm establishing this new religion. If you don't like it, see ya. And so the Pope threatens him with every possible punishment he could possibly threaten, including excommunication from the church, which is the biggest granddaddy, punishment of all during those times. And King George just says, shove it. I don't really care. I've got my own church now. I got a new wife, got a new church, and the people of England love it. It's, in the words of Donald Trump, it's really a great church. It's amazing. The best church I've ever seen. And so, in all seriousness, what he does is he ignores the problem. He literally realizes that the church and the Pope have so little power and so little influence, and he was, again, like I talked about in the last law, he mastered the art of timing to know that the Vatican's influence is on the decline, his military strength is on the upswing, and so those two crossing paths tells him, okay, this is not something I need to worry about. I can just play it off and not even look at it. He didn't even look at the Pope. From what I understand, he would get letters, letters would get delivered to his palace. He would throw them in the fire. He wouldn't even read the letters. It was to that level. And so that's it's a true badass. I mean, think about that. You're going up against the Vatican and Catholicism, and you're like, whatever. I'm just gonna go do my own thing. I'm gonna start a new church. See you guys. And that's just badass around a level that we don't even see these days. But beyond that, it's someone who really understands what a true threat to his existence or his well-being is, and it's somebody who just says, look, very clearly, I don't care what other people say, I understand where I stand, and I know what the real consequences are gonna be, none, and so I'm just gonna do what I want. And if we can model that and understand what really has consequences for you and what does not, it'll lead you to a better understanding of what you have to actually pay attention to and what you don't have to pay attention to. There are just some things that really are just gonna be, they're just gonna be what they're gonna be, and whether you react to them or not is not gonna change the outcome. So you might as well take your limited energy, right? You only have limited time and energy. You might as well focus it on something that you can actually affect change in and not worry about stuff that's going on around you. Now, on the flip side of this, the reversal of this law, so to speak, because there's always, there's two sides to every coin. There's the ignore things and don't pay them any mind, and then there's the, okay, but what if something's too big that you can't ignore it? And that is the reversal of this law. There are some things that actually do need to be taken care of. And so in the case of what King George did, he understood that he didn't need to worry about what the Vatican or the Pope was going to say. He understood that cost-benefit analysis. There are some things, though, that cannot be ignored. So, and if you ignore those things, they will lead to material consequences for you. And so that's the warning that's in the reversal of this law is you have to again, have a good meta awareness. That's something that's coming a lot in a lot of these videos, is you need to have a meta awareness of what's going on around you, and so that you don't misstep and you don't misunderstand the actual severity of something that you might think is just no big deal and that you can play off and ignore. If you don't do that, you can be setting yourself up for a really bad situation. And so that's the warning that goes along with this law. And I want to end with a story of something that's really cool. That I like the Japanese stories in this book for some reason. It's just like the Japanese examples of people who obey the laws in this book seem to be just super spot on. And so the author gives an example of a Japanese tea master. And so there's this guy who's over at his place, some like regular dude, not anything special. And he's at this Japanese tea master's house, and he's like the thing. Like, Japanese tea ceremonies in Japan are super, they're very extra, they're super extraordinary. And if you're a tea master, you're very held in high regard, basically. So this guy's over, and they have this bowl where I guess they grind the tea and it falls into a bowl, and then they distribute it into the bags, and then they actually brew it. So everyone's exclaiming how awesome the bowl is. It's handmade. It's been handed down through thousands and thousands of years of Japanese dynasties. And so this guy is like, this bowl is amazing. Can I bring it into light so I can examine it? And so they're on this balcony, and the tea master's having a good time. He's like, yeah, sure, no big deal. And so he brings it out into the balcony and proceeds to drop it. And as it shatters on the ground, the guy who, remember, this guy is just like a lowly, regular citizen. He's not royalty or anything. He goes back and he says, well, you know, it was very old. It was likely to break anyways. Better that it break now than in some disuse where it would actually have real consequences. So he actually shows disdain for the fact that he even bumbled and dropped the bowl. Obviously, he messed up, but he shows so much disdain and acts like it's not a big deal. That tea ceremony master has no choice but to reflect exactly what he's seeing in the other guy. So even though the dude that dropped the bowl, and I wish I could remember his name, but I can't off the top of my head, but the guy that dropped the bowl acts with so much disdain for what he did, it actually lowers the amount of importance that it holds in the group. And so what this law allows you to do is it allows you to control what's a big deal and what's not. Now, there's some realities that you just can't get around. I mean, if you're physically ill, don't ignore that. Don't not go to the doctor. But if there's someone who is just pestering you, say, for example, a lot of people get worked up about others who are pestering them on social media, that's not worth reacting to. It's actually much better for you to allow them to keep pestering you. Don't even hide the comments. I'm a fan of not even hiding the comments. Let them stay there, because they're just decreasing their own credibility. Stay on your path, keep on what you're doing, because it's just gonna show Grant Cardone has a great saying. He says, you know, if you have 10 haters, go get you 10 more. It's a sign that comes with doing what you're supposed to be doing and getting success. So that said, I hope that you got a ton of value out of this law. This was another long one, but the long ones are where the real treasure lies, I think, in this book. And so if you've not already, hit the subscribe button below and then hit the bell next to it so you get notified when I'm dropping new videos. Also follow me on Instagram @TampaBrad, and I will see you in the next video. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. Peace.